let's move on now to our legal roundup with Joseph Kotrie-Monson, who is joining me now to talk about, this one's made a lot of headlines. Now, I want you to cast your mind back to Captain Tom. Remember Captain Tom? He raised millions, almost £39 million for the National Health Service. He was a World War II veteran. He was knighted. He was honoured with an RAF fly past, and he actually got a $250,000 100th birthday cards. Well, here's the thing. Captain Tom's daughter has been ordered. This is the latest in a long-running saga. She's been ordered to tear down a pool complex after building it, quote unquote, building it using the name of the hero's charity at a £1.2 million home. Now, we should just say ahead of this that the £38 million raised by Captain Sir Tom Moore when he walked those 100 laps of his garden in Bedfordshire is not under investigation. The charity which received it has said, and that's a charity in conjunction with the NHS. Joseph, thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I'm interested to know why you picked this story.
Well, I think you summed it up straight away, Trisha. I think it was recently voted the feel-good story of the last 100 years or of this century in a newspaper poll. Who didn't shed a tear for good old Captain Tom? He was an understated Yorkshireman. He was doing what he could in his garden, 100 laps with his walking stick or his Zimmer frame, and just saying, I really respect, forget the politics about COVID. I really respect the sacrifices that these brave men and women in the NHS make. And I'm doing my little bit. Trisha, I'm getting a little bit emotional. Just
I know, because the money, when you look at it, it's been bought. This is with the NHS charities together. It's funded thousands of projects.
It's a £1 donation for every adult in the United Kingdom.
I mean, but this is why I'm so saddened by all of these headlines.
Yeah, and you know what? It's not about illegality. There's nothing been proven. It's about this really, first of all, this kind of slightly bad smell of a sense that the legacy has been tarnished, maybe just by mismanagement. Hannah Ingram, my understanding, she was a first time. That's the good Sir Colonel Tom, as he was later made. That's his daughter. She was a first-time trustee of a charity. It looked a bit ham-fisted, as if they had a tiger by the tail and were trying to make something of it. They were using her husband's company. I think that was the early story that gave rise to the Charity Commission investigation, not because anything was necessarily proven to be wrong, but when you have what lawyers call a related party transaction, you have one organization, in this case a charity, and a member of that charity is deciding to spend money on services from the same person or somebody related or connected, then that shouldn't happen. And you should have that decision-making ring-fenced. It doesn't appear that was in place. That doesn't mean that company, that marketing company, and £100,000 or £150,000 sounds like a whole load of money. But if you put it next to the millions and millions and millions that was being raised, and no doubt going to good causes, perhaps in context, that's not inappropriate. But it's the appearance of the possibility of something underhand or inappropriate going on that must be avoided. There must be, in the pursuit of charitable aims, they must be above reproach, and that was the sense of what was going on here, and how sad in that context. The Charity Commission investigation begins in January 2022. Already, a planning application had been put in the year before for a swimming pool and office. Whether that was and the office was an extra part of the application is not clear. And the name, although the application was not in the name of the foundation, it nevertheless was on the home property of Mrs. Ingram at the back. And Captain Tom's name, the foundation, was used in that documentation, including and not corrected. And this is the crucial bit. Always look to the chronology if you want to be a lawyer or an investigator. And we've got January the 22 for the Charity Commission investigation opening. You would think at that point, any attempts to attach Captain Tom's name to something that could be perceived as personal, well, they would be removed swiftly by the Ingrams. There's a further application later in 2022. That reference is not removed to Captain Tom. And I just think, and that's the clangor, isn't it? You know,
because this particular charity was put together after his death. So you're saying if you're using a name of somebody, as you say, who's created the feel-good headlines of the century for what appears to be your own gains. And I actually think we're wrong about that. I think that the charity begins when he's still alive, or at least the moves on that. So I don't think there is a sense in which this is distant relatives capitalizing on a name. But you're right, it's that perception, and there has been a bit of kind of blustering commercialization is what I would call it, rather than anything that was, inappropriate, underhand, or in bad faith. And we must be super, super sure on that. Let's not confuse issues. But when there's 4 books, a biopic, I think I'm saying that right, of Captain Tom's life in the offing, even, as I recently found out, a special commemorative Captain Tom gin. It makes me feel icky doing it. It's like, it does look like being capitalized. You've got somebody who did something out of the goodness of her heart, and it looks like his daughter and her husband. It gives the appearance of them making money out of it.
Yeah, it certainly creates an unfortunate impression. And what people need to realize is that when you read a story like this, don't think that charities are bent. Don't think that when you're paying your money to a charity, it's not going in the right place and therefore you should keep it to yourself. The sector, there is wonderful things done. There are wonderful things done for all types of people, animals, causes, and it's being on the whole well managed. And the fact that we have a charity commission that's investigating, primarily the charity commission provides guidance to charities, especially smaller charities who need this type of assistance, so that this type of bad PR doesn't happen. But we must, when we see stories like this, not think, oh, that money that I sent to Captain Tom or to this NHS charity, the other charity at the time, that was wasted. It wasn't wasted. None of this should tarnish how we feel about a remarkable moment in our history where we were behind the NHS. No matter what you think about COVID, weren't we all united in solidarity for the NHS? Wouldn't it be nice if some of that continues into the way that we think about our sadly striking junior doctors?
I couldn't agree with you more. Got to take a break. We'll be back with more with you right after this. Welcome back. I'm with Joseph Kotrie-Monson. We're looking at some of the legal stuff going on in the news. Joseph, the Cabinet Office has lost its legal battle over Boris Johnson's COVID WhatsApp messages. They'd argued that some of the content was unambiguously irrelevant. So we talked about this earlier, but they've lost their, what they wanted to hold them back. Nope, they can't.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking, as a recap, about private, WhatsApp messages, and also the private diary of Boris Johnson and an aide during a relevant period between January 2020 and I think February 2022, all to do with the COVID inquiry. Government's attitude has been very, I have to say, objectively arrogant. on this. They have said, you can see what the government's done. You don't need to know what the government was saying to each other. I'm afraid, and you've heard me say this before, the families of the bereaved deserve way more than that. They need to understand what conversations were being had and why decisions were made, not what decisions were made. That's Joseph's interjection rather than the judgment itself. Now, the High Court adjudicated on this in a judicial review. Lord Justice Dingermans, I think I'm saying that correctly, Mr. Justice Garnham. Now, they've said, well, listen, you can, irrespective of whether these documents are irrelevant, and you've alluded to that in your summary earlier, Trisha, well, that can be decided by the chair of the inquiry. She's no slouch as far as legal relevance is concerned. This is Baroness Hallett, former Lady Justice Hallett. She's a very senior judge. She can decide if you're talking about whether you need to replace the milk or arguing with your nearest and dearest in a WhatsApp message, whether that goes to the general public. To suggest that relevance is a reason to withhold raw data, I'm afraid that's legal nonsense, because a court or an inquiry can decide on relevance. It won't be admitted in a public forum otherwise. I have to say, I'm confused by the role that the government have played in this, because this was always going to be the judgment, in my view. They, in fact, have said afterwards, and this is a quote I'm going to read, "For our part, we welcome the judgment." Well, hang on a minute. If you were welcoming the judgment, why did you fight it the other way?
In the first place?
They say it provides welcome clarity. Well, you know, I'm not the best public lawyer. That's not my specialization in this jurisdiction. But I think I've just provided you all enough clarity on that. It's not complex law, Trisha. But they say, we think it has put forward a sensible solution which finds a way through this important issue, and will be complying. Damn right you'll be complying. But the interesting thing, Trisha, is that they're not appealing. All this
has all been a bit of a waste of time, which, talking to you, Joseph, it never is. I know, I wish we did have more time, but thank you so much. You've got your red tie on, you're ready and suited and booted to go. Joseph Kotrie-Monson with our roundup of what's made the news in the legal area. Thanks again, Joseph.